So anyway, other people,
I was gonna kind of
please.
just say what you said, that just actually like taking a picture, because the frame doesn't go everywhere. Like you have to decide like what's in and what's out, and so that is like the first step in selective, you know, I don't know what term you want to use for it, but
Lying.
yeah. And then as far as like retouching people's faces, I think like we have to, and there is a continuum, but like on one extreme you have like giving, let's say like a 7-year-old boobs, and on the other hand you have like someone on their wedding day who had a giant pimple on their forehead, where like they don't want to see that for the next however many decades. Like I think we could probably all agree that like taking out a pimple in someone's wedding photo is like perfectly acceptable, but like making someone's neck longer and their cheekbones higher and like their jaw more narrow, like at what point do they not even look like themselves anymore? And there's a continuum, but like I think that we would most of us would probably agree on like the extremes, but like it's finding the line where like you cross from one to the other, and how much does money make a difference in where that line is.
Wow, we have gotten right to the crux of the issue here in a nutshell, faster than I do in any of my other advanced classes. No, because that is the issue, I think, personally. So, but I want to hear from the rest of you guys. Is that something that you agree with, Mary?
Yeah, I totally agree. Just because I feel like there's a lot of times where you'll like start retouching things, and then you'll like kind of like just get into like the rhythm. You'll keep going, and then you'll like realize, okay, I went too far. But to someone else, that might not be too far.
Right.
So it's really trying to figure out like the balance between everyone, which is not really possible, because everyone's gonna have a varying opinion on what's too far
Right.
and what's not far enough.
Like I think like one thing you could say is like if it could be done with makeup, then it's fine to do it in Photoshop.
Well,
Or like if you could do it like okay, for example, I did a boudoir shoot with a cousin, and like she didn't get a pedicure. Okay, so her feet were all like scaly and gross, and I had to like blur all that out. And I'm like, well, this isn't. I mean, first of all, it's like for her, so like whatever, I'll do whatever she wants to.
Right.
My cousin's pictures, but like it's not lying, because if she had gotten a pedicure, like this is what her feet would have looked like.
Okay.
But you can do a lot with makeup and very much transform yourself. So you can turn into a whole nother person. Like literally tape, make like all that stuff. So I feel
Yeah, but
like
you can't
that,
like actually like what they did in the video. You can't make your
no, you can.
You can't make your neck actually longer. Though.
Well, but you can make it appear longer. Like you like it
Like
may
that.
not actually be
Yeah,
like an inch taller, but it's gonna look an inch taller.
It makes me think of drag.
Yeah, because that's what I was saying too. Like drag, and then like there's like this one person on Instagram. I don't know who she is. She always pops
Is
up
she
randomly.
hungry? Is that
Yeah,
what you're talking about?
like she's literally like she looks completely different in like one, and then when she transforms herself, she's a completely different person. Like you would not if you saw her, like the two things you'd think that they're two completely different people, but
There's
they're
a guy
not,
that
and
does
it's
that
all
too.
because of makeup.
Yeah, he makes himself
Okay,
look like all these different celebrities.
so is there in your own mind then? Does that fall? So the continuum that Liz was talking about, and the idea that there are extremes at both ends of that, would you agree that the sort of the makeup part falls somewhere in the middle of that continuum? It's like okay, or do you see that as the extremes?
I don't know. I'm like going back and forth.
So, but you don't. But the point is that whether I do it with foundation or I do it in Photoshop, is at the end the result is the same.
Yeah.
So, does that mean one's more legitimate and one's less?
Maybe it depends on how someone presents themselves every day. If you're taking a picture of someone who wears like a lot of makeup every day, and that's how they look every day, and that's how they present themselves, then like, is that like the truth? But if you take a picture of someone who doesn't wear any makeup and like put a bunch of makeup on them to make them look better, is that
like
lying?
models? Like, don't you do that to models? Don't you like? Aren't they like they're not wearing full makeup every day? But then when you like put them, I'm thinking like high like end models. Like when you take a picture of them, you're completely transforming them. So I mean,
well, then you have to think about what's the purpose of the photo. Are you taking a portrait of someone as they are, or are you trying to sell a product? Like different, you know.
Well, that's why I think who the client is really important.
Yeah.
Because like, what's the goal of this? Is this for like a promo poster, and therefore is it like a nightlife personality where we do need to sort of make them look elevated and larger than life? Is it for a super high fashion brand where we have to do the same? Like all those girls that walk in those shows, like they're not a lot of times they're not even in their own hair. So like, what's where the line is as far as what's physically in front of you versus like what you end up doing on the computer, like in Photoshop. Like, I just don't know if you're getting paid to make stunning and compelling images that are going to sell a product or sell an idea. I don't think it's really your job to like be making ethical decisions for your client. It's your client's job to either make the decisions and hire someone else to do it.
Isn't that kind of abdicating responsibility of like what the actual
I
effects
do
of these
think
images
to a
have on
certain-
society, though?
I do.
So like, whose responsibility is it to make those decisions?
The fashion house that's paying you $10,000 to make these images.
Yeah, but that doesn't
But are
abdicate
they
your
gonna make that call?
responsibility to choose whether you're willing to do it or not. Claire, really quickly.
I think ultimately it comes down to permission, and the permission, you need permission from your client to retouch. Like the original example you gave with the girl and the mom asking who to put boobs on the girl, I would not feel comfortable doing that because the girl doesn't have a say. But if it's the person who the picture is of that's asking you to make them look like a different person, that's what they want, so I wouldn't have a problem doing it. So I think ultimately it's the person who's being altered should be able to say whether they want to be how they want to look.
So, and
Well,
if they feel that way, then you feel like there's no line that could possibly be crossed if they have said they want that or they're okay with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, see, I agree with her, but I'm like, what if it's a paid model? Like, it's not their decision or their permission anymore. Wouldn't
Well, their
it be?
permission is
Then
implicit.
decide if it's a
Right.
paid model. Okay.
So from
I mean,
your
if
point of
you
view,
paid
like,
to
does
model,
it
then
hurt
you're
your credibility at all? Like, no matter like what kinds of jobs you pick up, or like what kinds of images you produce, or like does it affect your hiring?
So for me, because again, that's all I do is shoot fashion and beauty. That's what I shoot. That's the work that I do. For me, I'm in this world that this is simply the reality of this world, of the world that where I play. Okay, because the truth of the matter is, it's something interesting that I wrote down here. I've been doing this long enough. I go back long enough that there was a time back in the late '80s and the early '90s where the only people that you would see doing fashion covers, the only people in doing fashion stories on the inside of the magazines were the supermodels. And there was actually a handful of them from Chicago, people that I have worked with, whatever. And the thing about them was that they were freakishly flawless. Cindy Crawford had the most flawless skin, the perfect body, the perfect hair, the perfect eye color, the perfect spacing, the perfect hips, the perfect feet, it was just she was a freak of nature. But that's why she got the work. In 1990, it had been released earlier. Photoshop first started out in '85, but the first serious real production versions of Photoshop happened in 1990. And immediately you see a shift in all the fashion magazines from using supermodels to using actresses. And the only thing that made that possible was retouching. Because I can promise you, Sarah Jessica Parker is one ugly girl. Sorry, Sarah. I'm just kidding. No. I actually was in the photo studio working with her. My assistant, she was a smoker. My assistant was a smoker, and they would hang out in the kitchen together with Kate Moss. So you had all the extremes. But what allowed her to be a cover girl for Vogue is retouching. And then that began to dominate, and it's never gone back since. So the supermodels, as far as they exist. So at any rate, that's the world that I exist in. That's the world that I live in. And if I choose to compete in that world, then it's just something that's flatly expected of me. If I'm not doing that to my work, I'm not even in the ball game. That being said, there are people who have made a serious living off of doing what I call anti-fashion. So you take a photographer like Jurgen Teller, who actually does absolutely no retouching, and he will do everything he possibly can to make people look as raw and bad as is imaginable. But he has done it in such a way that he's built this gigantic career off of it. And I can't believe the people who still are willing to do that. But nonetheless, you sort of get where this is going. But the real reason that I bring this up, I know other people, does anybody else in this room have a feeling about any of this at all that they can lay out just a little bit for me? Emma.
I feel like specifically with supermodels, it's kind of a little easier because you still want to make them recognizable to the public. Like, I can see a picture of
Mhm.
But like when it's figures that are ambiguous to us, it gets harder because you don't know like what they look like in real life.
Right.
So
Okay, so I've got one last question that I want to ask, and then we've sort of got to wrap this up because I want to get on to doing this stuff. We are going to be doing retouching tonight. We're going to be doing body modification. That's something I specifically want to address and talk to you about with you guys, because this is a place where I do feel responsibility. And it is the whole notion of the idea that in Photoshop you can create a really distorted reality of body image that especially translates. I said this once and I realized that I was wrong about it. I said, I think that it in a way affects young women, I mean young girls more than anyone. And there was a guy in my class and he goes, fuck, it affects young boys just as much. And I was like, okay, you're absolutely right. But so I guess what I'm trying to get to, or the place that I'm trying to get to is, as retouchers, as people who are going to engage in this stuff, do we then bear any responsibility to the 8, 9, 10-year-old kid that's out there and what that does to their body image and their mind and their way they see themselves? Are we responsible for that?
You're not helping the issue.
Does that mean I shouldn't do it then?
No, I mean you enjoy it. It's your job. But
Does that fall into the continuum, into the spectrum?
I think you have to consider what the realistic ramifications are of any kind of work that you do.
I would.
And any, like, not just in photography.
Okay.
And any kind of work.
I would agree with
And
that.
if you care about these issues, then like that's a decision that everyone has to make for themselves.
Do you guys know where you stand? So that's the other thing, and the last thing that I will leave you with here, and it's the one thing that I would hope that you would do, is that give this enough consideration that you feel like you have a pretty firm grounding of what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do, and how the money plays into that choice and that decision. You know, I say this to people all the time. So, because we've had this conversation, so usually the boobs on the 7-year-old people are like, no, I would never do that. And then I'll say to them, what if I was offering you $1,000? Would you do it? So let me show of hands. We're going to put boobs on a 7-year-old girl. How many people in this room would not do that? Okay, proud, hands up high. How many people, of those people who've got their hands up, if I offered you $1,000, would you do it? Nobody. If I offered you $10,000, would you do it? If I offered you $100,000 to change an image of a 7-year-old girl,
Where's the image going?
That's my student loans.
okay, but now all of a sudden, but the point about all of this is that all of a sudden, and I'm not trying to say that then turns you into somehow some money grubbing, low lives here, because you're willing to actually compromise your moral or ethical code for money. But money, there is a reality in this, right? So then if I said to you, okay, I'll give you $500,000 to do this, who in this room would not put boobs on a 7-year-old girl for $500,000?
Oh, come on.
Shoot. What's your question?
Because it's very obviously people would be able to tell it's a young child and that you obviously put boobs on them. So wouldn't that damage your credibility as a photographer?
Yeah, but I've pocketed $500,000.
that's what I'm saying.
And people have short attention span. Like, you'll be vilified for like a minute and then people forget about it.
Oh, and then I think the whole story about it. Oh, he got paid $500,000 to do that. Wouldn't you do the same thing?
I think it speaks more to like how messed up the mom is than how messed up you are. So you could totally turn that around, get a good
There you go.
publicist that you could easily hire with.
Okay, so this is going to be the last thing. The last thing I'm going to leave you with right here. How many people in this room would cut off their little toe for $500,000?
Oh yeah.
So you guys would mutilate yourself, but you would not retouch boobs onto a 7-year-old. That just blows me away.
If it
Oh,
doesn't affect
yeah.
my
No, I wasn't saying that about everybody.
balance.
How many people in this room would shoot their dog for $500,000? How many people in here would shoot their dog for $10 million? Shoot your dog dead.
I would
Yeah.
kill him
All
out
right,
of
maybe-
misery. Like if
All
I
right,
do it
if
for
he was
500
dying.
$10 million. But I get the proverbial dog, and I would.
The only
You would get a dog just so you could shoot
exactly.
Where's
This is my dog. So
That's
wait, guys. All I'm trying to leave you with in all of this, again, is just this isn't something that you can just abstractly leave on the back burner and say, no, this doesn't matter, this doesn't plan, this doesn't figure into this, whatever. It's important that you realize where your limits are, what you would allow to push those limits, what wouldn't push those limits. I mean, I think Claire has a feeling that there's a line that she simply would not cross, no matter what. And I think that that's important. The reason I really bring this up, this plays more into, this is a lecture that actually comes out of my retouching class. In that retouching class, there's a lot of people in there who are actually planning on careers in retouching, and it becomes really critical for them because the worst thing that could possibly happen to you is to be in the situation. So I'm going to take Parker as an example, to be in a situation with a client, having a client say, will you do this for me? And him not know the answer. Him feeling like, I don't know what to say to them. I don't know, would I do this? Would I not do this? Whatever. Because if it is a client and it's a repeat client, then you've just showed them that you really haven't thought this through. You don't really know how you stand. And that builds absolutely no confidence between a client and that sort of client-professional relationship. It will just undermine everything. And they will walk out of there thinking about looking for another photographer or another retoucher. We good on this? Okay, with that being said, we are going to look at retouching tools really quickly. So I asked you guys to download those files, and I'm going to take a look at, I think I've got the very same ones that are downloaded, so let me check in mine. What I'm going to show you right now, what we are doing right now is retouching. Hold that thought for 1 second. Just so that you know how to work the tools. So we are going to be doing body modification. We're going to be doing all of that. This is more an exercise in learning those skill sets. And then how you choose to use them is a completely different issue. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, so the first one that I want to open up, if you look inside the retouch practice file, there's a one that's called Face OR8VC. I have no idea what that means, but at any rate, we're going to open this guy up and we're going to start to work on this. So in working on this face, if you, again, the keyboard shortcuts to actually get the move tools, the zoom tools, is if you hold down the space bar and the command key, you get the positive zoom tool. If you add the option key, it's the negative one. So I want to use the positive one to zoom in and actually look at this girl's face. You can see it's slightly out of focus. This is not my image, but at any rate. When we take a look at this image, though, you can actually see that there's some issues that you could possibly deal with. So again, I am not making any value judgments on this. It's the reason I looked at those videos. So all I'm going to do is go through this the way I would as a professional retoucher and talk about the things that might come up in the way that I would ultimately deal with them. And hang on 1 second because I'm going to steal a mouse. Okay, so first things first in this. This did open up as a smart object. Did yours open up as a smart object as well? No. It didn't? So you don't have the little icon down at the bottom? That's weird. No?
Did you drag it into Photoshop or did you just...
Either way, it should have still opened that way. So let me just make sure there's not more than one copy down here. So again, this face 08 vc.psd. All right, so open the one, just the smart object, because what I want to show you is with a smart object, again, the smart object is the protective envelope that it's actually sitting inside, so you cannot retouch directly on this guy. So for instance, if you hit the S key, that is the clone stamp tool, you'll see that you cannot do any work on this. Your cursor goes to that circle with a slash through it. So we need to actually make a copy of this to do our work on. So yeah, it's the Retouching Practice Files 2 folder. There's 4 files in there. One of them says Content Aware, one of them says Face Retouch, one of them says Liquify, and the other says this is one we're looking for. Yeah. On the school server, you should have had retouching practice files.zip.
Oh, you download them from Canvas.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
They're going to be in session 6 resources.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you download it and then open them up, they'll be inside there. Okay. All right, so back into Photoshop. So in order to actually retouch this thing, we need to make a copy that is not a smart object. So to do that, simply click on this, drag it down. Now again, in this case, these are 2 clones. These are clones of one another. So we're just going to rasterize the top one. And what rasterize means is that we are...
Wait, what?
That's okay.
How'd you make that copy?
I just drug it down. Just here, I'll show you. Just drag it down to the very bottom. Because even though they're true clones of one another, we're going to rasterize this, which will... When you drag it down to the little dog-eared guy...
Oh, to the dog ears.
You're going on to the... You're clicking on the folder. You need to be on the dog-eared guy next to it. Next to the garbage can. That's okay. I would offer you mine, but then I'm screwed. So, okay. All right, so we need to change this because, again, you'll see you can't do any work on this guy as well because it's also a smart object. So to turn it into a conventional normal layer, come up to the Layer menu, come down to Smart Object, down to Rasterize. So look up at my menu right here, my screen. You can see up to the Layer menu, down to Smart Objects, and then in the Flyout menu all the way down to the very bottom that it says Rasterize down at the very bottom. Has everybody got that? And if you let go, you will see that that little icon goes away, and now you actually can do work on this. You can paint on it. You can do all sorts of things on it. So I'm going to zip back out. We're going to talk about the Clone Stamp tool first. The Clone Stamp tool is an original tool in Photoshop. It was the first of the serious retouching tools. It has pretty much, there's still reasons to use it, but in retouching, most of those reasons have been replaced by better tools. But I want to show you what it is and how to use it. So again, it's the S key if you want to just hit the S key. But if you can't remember that, if you look at your tool menu over here, it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's the 9th tool down. It's a thing that looks like a little rubber stamp. If you click on the lower right-hand corner drop-out flyout menu, you'll see that you get the Clone Stamp tool or the Pattern Stamp tool. You always want to be working with the Clone Stamp tool. When that happens, any tool that you pick, you get a set of options that sit up along the top. In the options that are sitting up along in the top, again, this works just like it does for the brush menu. If you click on the drop-down next to this little number, you'll see that this is where you can control the size of the brush, because the Clone Stamp tool is a brush. You can also control the hardness of it. Most people will work in a 50% hardness of this. It makes the tool a little less obvious. If you want to get rid of that flyout menu without actually marking up your screen at all, simply click on the name Adobe at the top. The menu will fly back out, and then you can actually go ahead and do your work. There's other things that we need to talk about in here really quickly, and it's the next one over is the blending mode for this. You want to leave yours as normal, and then opacity at 100% and flow at 100%. We did go over opacity and flow in this class, didn't we? Okay, so I'm not going to deal with that part again, at least not right now. So the way you use the Clone Stamp tool is this. You actually pick the source that you want to then replace pixels with. So I'm going to actually put an eyeball right on the middle of this girl's, the tip of her nose. So to do that, you need to select the eyeball first. To do the selection, hold your cursor, put your cursor over the eyeball, hold down the Option key, and you will see your cursor changes to a targeting device, and click once. And what you've now said is that that's where you want, that is now going to be your source. To do your replacement, come over her nose. I'm going to go right in the middle of her nose, and I'm going to click and start to just paint out a line right here, and you can see that you're actually replacing what you're using the source that was in the beginning, and you're doing the replacement in the destination. Does that make sense to everybody, what just happened? Okay, so clone stamp tool works great for certain things, not what we're really going to do for retouching. So to get rid of that, hit Command Z. The tool that we're really going to use primarily for retouching is not the clone stamp tool, but it is the healing brush tool. So get to the healing brush tool. It is the, it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th icon down. It's also the J key if you simply hit the J key. However, there's a number of tools that we will use in this flyout menu. So again, if you want to click on the lower right-hand corner of that, you will get a flyout menu. The spot healing brush tool is the one we're primarily going to work with, and I'll show you the difference in it in just a second. However, to start here, I want you to actually pick the healing brush tool instead. It's the second of the tools down, so not spot healing brush, but the healing brush tool. In the healing brush tool, it works in a very similar fashion to the clone stamp tool with two major differences. One is that it will actually replace texture, but then two, it will actually try to blend the new texture in by looking at the surrounding color around this. So to see what it means or the way it works, I want you to zoom into that red pimple that's actually on the, or red blemish, whatever it is, that's on the right side of her face. Again, to zoom in without changing tools, hold down the space bar and the command key and simply click on this, and I want you to come in pretty tight on this guy right here. So what you can see, again, to control your brush size when you're out working in this space, you use the bracket keys that are just to the right of the P key. The bracket key that's immediately to the right of the P key will make your brush smaller. The one that's to the right of that will make your brush bigger. So you want to get something that's roughly close to the size of this guy. And so what will happen here when we talk about replacing texture, I'm going to show you exactly, hopefully, what this means. It works the same way that the clone stamp tool does, in that you need to establish source to do the fix first. So to establish source, I'm going to work in this area. Look up at my screen really quick. I'm working in a screen area up here that's still got a lot of pores in her skin, which makes sense to me because this area down here has also got pores. So what I'm going to try to do is grab the texture from up here. I'm going to replace this with with the texture that's up here. But then what the tool will do is it's actually going to look at the color that's around this replacement, and it's going to try to blend in the color. Does that make sense, what we're trying to do here? So again, up here at the top, I'm holding down the Option key. I'm clicking once. That establishes my source. And then I'm going to come down here and click and move it around slightly. And you can see that it actually replaced that texture with the texture. So I kept the texture the same. I actually, I felt like this area needed the pores in her skin that are matching up here. We're going to hit Command Z to undo that, and did a pretty good job of it. Command Z to undo that part of it. Then I'm going to grab texture from a different place. I'm going to grab texture with this area right over here that's her upper lip that is completely smooth. It does not have any texture in it really to speak of. So again, I'm going to reset a new source point here by holding down the Option key. Clicking once, that sets my new source point here. I'm going to come up and I'm going to do the same thing here again. And you can see in this case now, again, it did exactly the same thing. It took the texture from here, it replaced it, it then blended in the area that's around this guy using, looking at the color that's around it. Now, in my opinion, this is not as effective as a retouching, because I think that this is an obvious, it's an obvious retouch, because I see textured skin that is all around here, and unless I'm going to get rid of all of those pores that are all the way around here, I have actually made this big blob of smooth skin in the middle that really does not belong there. Does that make sense to you guys? Are we good on this?
I have one issue. My cursor still has an eyeball.
Click and drag on there and just see what happens. Oh, that's bizarre. Hit Command Z to undo that guy. Restart Photoshop. Okay, so we need to be a little bit more specific about how this tool works. So I'm going to hit Command-Z to undo that, and I'm going to actually go after it the way that I felt like we should go after this to begin with. So it's going to be up to this area right in here. I'm going to hold down the Command key. I'm going to click on that. I'm going to come over here and paint on that, and it does a fairly good job of it. So that's basically the healing brush in a nutshell. Does that make sense to you guys? I'm going to hit Command-Z again to undo that. We need to look at the other tool that's in this same group, though. So it's the other tool. Again, if you click on the flyout menu, it's supposed to be a Band-Aid, and you come to the Spot Healing Brush tool. In the Spot Healing Brush tool, you'll see you get a different size brush. So again, I'm going to make my brush a little bit larger, so it's about the same size as this guy right here. You will see that you've got a different set of options that exist up here at the top. You still have a brush. If you click on this drop-down menu, you still do have a brush. Size and hardness. Again, I'm going to leave my hardness at about 50%. The size I'm actually have already made slightly larger. I'm going to keep the blending mode of my brush to normal. But now you've got this thing called Content Aware. And what Content Aware actually does is that you'll see, we're going to try and do the exact same thing again. I'm going to hover over this area that's got that skin texture. I'm going to hold down the Option key and click to set my source point, and you get this warning dialog box that comes up. And it says that the Healing Spot Brush tool automatically samples pixels to correct a spot in one step. So I'm going to hit cancel in here. With the Spot Healing Brush tool, Photoshop tries to figure out the best source for texture to actually replace this with. Does that make sense? So you don't pick anything. You simply paint over this guy. However, you need to look up at my screen really quick. There are people who do this, and this is a mistake. There are people who will click and drag across this and then let go. And the mistake that they've made is that the tool works the same. It's going to look for texture that it feels like is appropriate for this. But then it's going to, again, try to blend in the surrounding area. It's going to try to blend in the color that's in the area that's surrounding. However, we left part of the original problem. Part of that original blemish is still on this girl's face. So that original bad, really red color here got figured into the color blend that this tool is actually using, which is a mistake. You don't want that to happen. So I'm going to hit Command-Z to undo it. So the trick to using this tool is you need to paint across the entire blemish. You need to do a much bigger job of it all in one shot and then let go and see how you feel about this. So in this case, again, I feel like it does a relatively good job. It's keeping, instead of the pixels being quite so, the pores being quite so in focus up here, it's actually matched a version that's down here that's probably a little bit better. It's probably a smarter place to go from. Again, and it hasn't picked this small area down here. It hasn't picked the really smooth area down here. So with this tool, we can actually bang through some of the rest of this part pretty quick. So I'm going to click on this part up here. I'm going to click on both of those guys. I'm going to click on this guy right here. I'm going to click. Now, so you see this guy right here. I think that leaves too obvious of a dot. So I'm going to hit Command-Z to undo that. I'm going to drag across that a little bit more. And I still feel like that's too obvious. So we need to actually make this tool function better. So I'm going to hit Command-Z to undo. Can you guys see the spot that I'm actually dealing with, this problem spot? It's this guy right down here. Every time I drag across that, I can spot that a mile away. Can't you guys? I can totally see that. So I'm going to hit Command-Z to undo that. So we can be more restrictive about how this brush works, because what's happening is it's actually fixing this problem here, but it also feels like there's other problems other places. So this is what I want you guys to do. We need to talk about this. When you look at this blemish right down here, is it darker or lighter than the area that's around it? It's kind of both. I'm going to go with it's kind of both as well. So we're going to see if we may have to accept this. We may end up not fixing this the way I was hoping to, but we'll see how it works here. You have got blending modes for this tool. And if you click on the blending mode up at the top, what this tool will do, when you're on normal right here, it works exactly the way that we've actually been doing this. But we can change the blending mode. And when you change a blending mode, you can say, I only want to lighten something or I only want to darken something. Now, there are other blending modes in here. We're not going to get into those guys right now. We're going to strictly stay with lighten and darken in this and see if it helps. So I see a dark line right here in the middle. There's a lightness that's on both sides of it, but I see a dark line that's right in the middle here. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller, and I'm going to change this blending mode to lighten. What will happen now, and in this regard right here, is that in theory it should only affect that dark line that's in the middle. So I'm going to click and drag through that and let go. And now for my money, this actually makes for a much better, more successful guy. There was a little part that was on the end of that guy as well. If you want to see what the difference is, turn the eyeball off on your retouching layer, and you can see what's actually going on underneath this guy. I personally feel like that actually helped. So to see this again, I'm going to come over here. There's this line that runs right down the side of her mouth. It's a crease line in here. And you would say that this crease line actually is darker than the surrounding area. So again, this blending mode of lighten would be the correct one to use. And typically here, I will do this in smaller strokes. And I will actually come down like this to sort of paint my way through this. And I'll continue to work my way down like this to try to remove that line out of it. Now you can see as we're going down in here, it actually is lightening up some stuff as well. So I think it worked out really well up here in the top part, but down here in the bottom part, I think I can still see that trench. So I'm going to go back in history, and I'm going to bring that line back in just the lower part. So basically, from where the corner of her mouth is down, I don't think that was actually the best setting to have that. It did lightning work in here, but there's also there's a highlight and a shadow side to this. So I need to get both of those. In order to get both of those, you would go back to normal, because normal will do both. Normal will actually fix the darker parts and the lighter parts, which is what I really feel like I've got going on in there. And that actually does seem better to me right there. So then I'm going to hold down the space bar by itself. It will temporarily give you the hand. Then you can actually come up and we can actually look in an area like this area that's right in here. Again, I think the primary issue right here is this needs to be made lighter. So I'm going to drop my blending mode down to lighten. And I'm going to take this area out right here. And I feel like that did a reasonably good job. Finally, I'm going to go up to this area that's right underneath her eyes. There are these lines that are right underneath her eyes. That would clearly, well, we'll try it first as a normal. So I'm going to come up and do normal. And then I'm going to simply click and drag across this line and see how it does. And you can see that there's a huge problem in here. It's actually spotting, I think it's actually using this area underneath her eye as a replacement for this right here. That would actually be a problem. I'm going to Command Z to undo that. So in this case, the spot healing brush tool is not the tool to use, because it's actually sampling this area that's right underneath her eyeball, and that's what it's replacing in here. So instead, I'm going to change this back to the healing brush tool, because I get to pick the sample source where I want it to draw from, and I'm going to have it draw from this area that's right underneath her eye. So I'm going to hold my cursor right underneath that line, hold down the Option key, click once. That sets my sample point, and now I can click and drag this line out, and that gets rid of it on this side. I'm going to click and drag on the other side. What's hard to see, but if you guys can look, when I click and drag this, do you see the other little X that's right underneath it? That other little X is my source point. That's where it's picking this up. And you see as you move the cursor along, it's actually dragging that in concert, in unison with this area. So does that make sense what I'm talking about? So that when you sample that, it's not just taking the original sample point and putting that everywhere. It is actually following the direction that you're actually going. So the source point is moving in conjunction, in alignment with the resample point, with the fixed point that's happening up above it. Is this working for you guys? Are we good on this? Okay. So there was, I'm going to actually hit out the rest of these lines right here. There was this conversation in this class earlier about retouching too much. So I think maybe Mary, was it you? Somebody said you were saying you wipe it all out. You just take it all off and it ends up looking like plastic person, right? So there's a way to actually bring this back to bring on a level of believability. Because if we kick back out, I'm going to zoom back out here, and you actually look at this, you can see that she's got dark circles under one eye or lines under one eye, but she doesn't have them under this other eye. And so there are people who would say, okay, well, this looks completely fake to me. So there's a way to actually bring this back. If you put a layer mask on our retouching layer, first do me a favor, rename that retouching layer. I just double clicked on the name that said layer 0 copy, and I'm going to call it retouch. And say okay to that. We can put a blank layer mask on this. To put a white layer mask on it, simply click on it. It's the icon, again, at the bottom of our layers palette. It's the square that's got the little dark circle in the middle of it. If you click on that once, it puts a layer mask on here. Because the layer mask is white, it is revealing all of this work. All of this work we are able to see. So all the retouching is apparent here. But if you hit the B key to get a brush, I'm going to make it a fairly large brush. Hit the D key to default your foreground and background colors to black and white. If you hit the X key and make black your foreground color, so what I want to do is I'm going to paint with black on this mask for that area that's right underneath her eye. And if you click and drag this across, you will actually bring back the lines that are underneath her eye because you completely hid. The mask is now hiding this layer that's got the retouching on it. Does that make sense? However, you don't need to keep it that way. Hit Command Z to undo that. If you've got more than one stroke on there, Command Option Z to get rid of that part, to go back. Instead, you could actually drop the opacity down to say like 30% or 45% and drag across these guys now, and you would bring back part of that line that's underneath her eye. Does that make sense what's going on here? So it's a way to, so Mary, what a lot of people do, retouchers that I know the way they work, they go in here and they blast this skin out to the point that it truly looks like plastic. Then they'll throw a layer mask on it like this, and then they will just go over the entire image using a low opacity brush to pull back stuff. If you feel like this pullback was too strong, then you can hit the X key and you can paint back again with white and you can take it all back out again. So it allows you to do, to really go in and fine tune everything as opposed to throwing all of your retouching away and starting from scratch again. Does that make sense to everybody? Are we good on this part? Okay. You can get rid of this. You can close her up. Go back to that same folder that we downloaded, and it's actually in the other folder in the Liquify practice files. If you go into that folder, there's a file in here called A Man and His Belly. Drag that on top of Photoshop. You're going to get a warning, hopefully, that this has got an embedded sRGB profile. If you don't and you're working on your computer, you're in trouble. Did that warning come up? Okay, so has everybody got this guy on screen? Okay, everybody got the beer guy up? Why did I call him the beer guy? I know, yeah, but that's just, anyway. Okay, so, again, first things first, whenever you do retouching, you would never retouch on the virgin layer. Copy this. You always keep a copy of your file no matter what you're planning on doing. We're going to keep a copy of this guy. So again, I'm going to drag this guy down to make a copy of it. But now in this case, I'm actually going to turn this into a smart object because all of the work I'm going to do here I actually can do as a Liquify, which is a filter, and it will function as a smart filter. So this is, even though I can't retouch this, I can't, it's not a smart object yet. But I'm going to turn it into one. I won't be able to paint on it. I won't be able to clone on it. But I will be able to actually do liquifying on this. How many people in this class have ever done any liquifying in Photoshop? Okay. All right, so just curious. Okay, so the first things that we're going to do here, we're going to change this into a smart object. So up to the layer menu, down to Smart Objects, over to Convert to Smart Objects. So look up at my screen here, because this one's important, especially for liquifying. You used to not be able to liquify smart objects, but they've made it so you can now, and it's changed everything. So again, up to the layer menu, down to smart objects, convert to smart object. You should get that little icon that's down here at the bottom. Again, if you hit the S key for the clone stamp tool, you cannot clone on this guy. If you hit the J key, that's the healing brush tool, you can't do that. If you hit the B key, it's the paintbrush, you can't paint on that, all because this is a protected smart object. However, you can run filters on this. And so again, we are going to do this as a smart filter. So to do that, come up to the filter menu, come down to Liquify, and it will take you into its own space. This is the Liquify space. It's basically left Photoshop right now. We are working in our own space here, and we need to talk about how this space ultimately works. So we'll get through this, and hopefully that we'll have enough to go on we'll be able to get through all of this. So the beginning part of this can look somewhat daunting. Don't get too overwhelmed by this because I'm not going to hit everything that's in here, but we'll touch enough of the bases. So there's a set of tools that are on the left over here. So I need everybody to grab the first tool at the very top. This is called the push to the left tool. The bracket keys that are just to the right of your P key also will change brush size here, as will these options right over here. So the options palette that in Photoshop runs along the top are now sitting over here. So you can change brush size here. What density is I don't know why they don't rename all of this stuff, but they don't. Density is hardness. So this is controlling the edge of your brush. Again, in all the work that we've been doing before, that 50% edge in our cloning and our healing worked pretty well. So I'm going to go ahead and say leave your density here at 50. Pressure only works if you're working on a tablet. You can emulate it here, but it doesn't really work. And then we don't have rate in this. You can get rate with other tools. So that's basically what's going on in here. So the way this tool works, we're going to do this right by this guy's head. I need you to, I've got a brush size, if you want your brush to be close to what mine is, I've got a brush size of 166 pixels. If you click and you drag across this, you can actually see it pushes in his head. It's pushing everything. We just pushed everything to the left as far as that part goes. If you crank your pressure all the way up to 100, you'll see that that actually ends up being much more extreme when you do it. If you hit Command Z once, it will undo one step of that. If you hold down Command Option Z, it will go through all of those. If you drop your pressure all the way down, I'm going to crank it down to like a 3 or a 4, and click and drag through, you'll see that you hardly see anything at all. So it's just the extremeness of this motion that's actually happening here. I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. I'm going to crank the pressure all the way back up again. I'm going to click through here and really crank him out to sort of make something really odd here. To undo all of that, in my case, I've got a face-aware drop-down menu right here. I'm going to click the small triangle to close that up. That gives me other options that I can actually see right here. And the option that I'm actually looking for in here is at the very bottom. So at the very bottom down here, you should see there's a button down here that says Restore All. If you click on that, it will undo everything that you've done in here. So if we click and do this to him and click and do that to him and click on the Restore All, it brings everything back. If you click and drag through this guy's head again and then go to the next tool down in the toolbox on the tool side, if you click on this tool, this is the Reconstruct tool. It also has a brush size, it also has a pressure setting, density, but it's also got rate now because this will now add an element of time in this. If you start to click on this guy and sort of start to move it around, it will start to slowly undo what the push to the left tool did. And that is all controlled here by rate. I have a relatively small rate. Again, if we click and drag this tool through his head again, then go back to the Reconstruct tool and crank the rate way up high. Now when I click on this, it zips back really fast. So it's just a way to tune your control on this. The next tool down, first off I want to do this. Click on the very top tool, the push to the left tool, and I want you to make it a little bit smaller, and I want you to come down to this guy's butt, and I want you to click and make his butt really jagged. I want to put in a whole series of little, look at my screen up here, you'll see a little series of lines that I'm talking about. Now, you could go in and try to smooth this out with the Reconstruct tool. It gets to be extremely difficult to do, but if you go to the third tool down, which is another brush, if you hover over it, you should get a fly out here. It is the Smooth tool. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger here. And then again, I'm going to drop my rate down here to slow this action down a little bit. And then I'm going to start to paint across him right here really quick. And what you'll actually see is that you can smooth this out. Now that's actually still got some distortion, some liquefying that's happened to that. If you look at the bottom of the menu that's on the far right-hand side, there's a preview checkbox down at the bottom. And you can see if you turn this preview on and off, it sort of shows you what you're doing. And you can see that what the smooth tool did was it smoothed out all of those bumps that I put in. However, it's not the same as the reconstruct tool, which would undo all of this. So again, if we go back to the reconstruct tool and drag across this, you can see it pushes his butt all the way back out again. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay, the next tool down is the Twirl tool. I want you to go ahead and make this relatively big tool using the bracket keys. If you simply click and hold, I'm holding right next to his ear, you see that it spins his the entire liquefying in the clockwise direction. If you add the Option key, it will spin in the opposite direction, and you can continue to go this way. If you click on Restore All, it will undo that part. The next tool down is the Pucker tool. Again, I'm going to make this close to the size of this guy's head. I'm going to click and hold the tool down, and you can see that what it's doing is it's dragging the outside edges towards the center. Again, the way it's supposed to be like lips puckering. If you hold down the Option key, you get the opposite of that, which is the Bloat tool. If you, again, click on Restore All down at the bottom, you get rid of that. The tool right under it, which is redundant now, is the Bloat tool. So if you click on the Bloat tool, it actually makes it bigger. If you hold down the Option key, it becomes the Pucker tool and makes it smaller. So these tools right here, the two of these, are strictly the inverse of one another. I'm going to click on Restore All. The next tool down is the Push to the Left tool. Now this is a tool a lot of retouchers use. You need practice and you need to get really good at it. But what this tool will do, and I'm just going to show you guys here, we're not going to work with it a whole lot. I'm going to show you guys right here. If you bring the tool and you hover over, I'm right next to this guy's crotch. If you click and drag up, it pushes all of your pixels to the left. I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. If you click and drag down, it pushes all the pixels to the right. Command Z to undo that. If you click and drag right to left, it pushes all of your pixels down. Command Z to undo that. And then if you click and go left to right, it pushes all the pixels up. Command Z to undo that. The next tool down is the Freeze tool. With the Freeze tool, I'm going to go ahead and make it a little bit larger. To use the Freeze tool, I'm going to uncheck something here really quick just to show you how this works first. I'm going to click and try to paint on this guy's head, and I get this warning that comes up, and it says, the Show Mask checkbox is preventing the preview of showing you what you're doing. So I'm going to say OK to that. That means that there's this checkbox over here under Show Mask. If you click on that, it will actually show you the painting of the Freeze tool. So now when we come in here, we can actually see what it is we are freezing. So I'm going to freeze all of this guy except for his belly right here in the middle. Then I'm going to grab the Push to the Left tool, or the Warp tool right here, the Forward Warp tool. I'm going to make my cursor extremely big. And now I'm going to click and drag across this, and you can see that what has happened is the areas that are covered under this freezing are frozen. You can't liquefy them. They are protected. Now, we have just actually done this move and protected him. However, this tool, you can undo it. It's the next tool down. This is the Thaw tool right here. It's the one that's supposed to look like an eraser. Again, I'm going to make this guy much, much, much larger. I'm now going to erase the area of the Freeze tool that's actually around his head. And now, again, if I go back to the Forward Warp tool and hit now, I am actually changing everything. But again, the area that was down here, that remains down here, is still frozen. So I'm going to click on Restore All to undo that. To get rid of any masking that you've done like this, you can come over to the mask options right here and simply click on None. The reason they have a mask all here is that let's say that you only wanted to freeze You want to freeze everything in this image except for this guy's head. You could click on Mask All, which puts the mask completely over him. Then I'm going to go for the Thaw tool here and simply thaw out his face. So that just it's a faster way to be able to control this. However, I'm going to get rid of the mask altogether by clicking on None. The next thing down is Face Aware, which we're not going to use in this guy because he doesn't have a face we can work with. And then finally, the two tools at the bottom are the Hand tool and the Magnifying tool. So that's basically the tool set. So in terms of how to work with this tool, this is the best suggestions that I can give you is this. You want to use the largest brushes that you can use, and you want to do the smallest movements that you can, and a whole lot of them. So we're going to go after this guy's belly first. To do that, come up and grab the Forward Warp tool. Now this tool is a little bit too large for me here, so I'm going to bring it down a little bit. I'm going to go after something about like this. If you want to use the very same size brush that I'm using, I've got a 600 pixel brush. I've got a 50 density, which means the softness, the edge of this is at 50%. I'm going to drop the pressure down to about half in this because I don't want this to take off on me too quickly. And then I'm going to come in and I am just using the very edge of this brush. So watch what I'm doing here really quick, and then I need you guys to do the same thing. So I'm going to start here with the center part of his belly that I feel like is the part that I need to go after first. I'm going to click and start to push in, and I'm clicking and letting go. Click and let go. I'm working my way slightly up here. I'm coming down and I'm clicking. I'm doing very, very, very small little touches of this repeatedly. Every time you see this thing move, I am re-clicking one time after another. And I'm continuing to do the whole same thing. Again, this works much, much better doing this than it would possibly work if you were trying to actually just do this in one fell swoop and push this part down. So that does a pretty fair job of flattening out his belly. I'm going to leave his package where it is because that's what he's looking at clearly. But I need to make his chest a little bit larger. So to make his chest a little bit larger to sort of help balance this out, I'm actually going to go after the Bloat tool. So it's, again, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th tool down, the Bloat tool right here. And I'm going to keep it about this size. Again, it's just by coincidence. This turned out to be a 600 pixel size brush. I am going to click the rate down on this guy too. I don't want this to take off on me too fast. So I'm down somewhere in the high 30s. Then I'm going to come over to his chest and I'm simply going to click once and see what happens. Then I'm going to slightly move around in this and continue to click and see what happens. And again, I'm building his chest up slightly more. Then I'm going to go back to the Push Forward Warp tool because what it's doing is it's pushing it out, but it's also pushing down. I'm going to click right on this guy's nipple and lift and pull up again a little bit. So I'm trying to, again, I'm trying to lift his boobs up and push them out a little bit. I'm going to go back to the Bloating tool here. And again, I'm going to click to try to make this part a little bit bigger. Again, I'm going to go to the Forward Warp tool and lift his chest up slightly. If you want to see what the work looks like now that we've done, come over to the Preview checkbox and you can actually click this on and off. You'll see now that by doing that, I have distorted this guy's face. He didn't have a chin to begin with, and I've now completely removed it. So we need to fix that part of his chin. To do that, I want to reconstruct that, but I don't want to change his chest. His chest is good for me. It's where I want it right now. So I'm going to grab the Freeze tool, which is, again, this tool right here. I'm going to make it smaller, and then I'm going to paint on this area right here just so that I freeze his chest, so that that part isn't going to be changed. And then I'm going to go after the Reconstruct tool, the one that's under the second one down, and I'm going to simply paint over his entire chin to bring back the whole chin area. So his entire chin now has come back, but his chest that we made bigger hasn't changed. I'm going to click on None to get rid of that, and then do my preview again. And you can see now it's only made his chest bigger, his stomach smaller, but his face is completely untouched. Is everybody good on this part? And I'm going to go ahead and say OK to this. This is the advantage of having a smart filter. It sits right down here. So with a smart filter, you can actually turn the Liquify off, and it goes back to the way it really was. Or you can turn the Liquify back on, and it goes back. So then you've got somebody, an art director, who says, well, I like the stomach being skinnier, but you really didn't need to give him more of a chest. I want the old chest back. You could simply hit the B key to get your brush. Make sure it's a normal blending mode, 100% opacity, 100% flow. Click on the mask for your smart filter. And again, with a black brush, I'm going to make my brush a little bit larger. Hitting the X key to make black as my foreground color, I can mask out what that tool did to his chest. So now I'm hiding that filter, that smart filter. So you get the effect of his stomach, but you don't have the effect of his chest. And then, of course, your art director comes right back to you and says, oh, God, I hate that. I'd really much rather have his chest big again. So, again, go back to your brush, select the mask for that smart filter, come back over here, hit the X key to paint with white. And again, white will reveal, black will conceal. So you are actually getting rid of hiding that layer mask work. And so it shows up again. Are we good on this, guys? Are there questions about this? Okay. Verser, show me something that's going to impress me. Close this guy up. We've got 10 minutes to try to impress you. Back in this guy again. I want to go back to the original retouching group right here, the retouching practice files. There is a file in here called Content Aware TIFF. If you can drag that into Photoshop. How many people in this room are working with Content Aware? Okay, well, good. I'm going to double click on the hand to get this thing to be as large as it can be. We're going to blast through this pretty quick, but I'll show you how it works. I'm going to show you the right things and the wrong things. The first thing that we need to do is we actually need to make a copy of this layer. Again, we would only work on a copy. I'm going to click on the name background copy, rename it Retouch, and say OK. And I'm going to start after the two guys that are in the water to begin with. So the two guys that are in the water to begin with, what I really want to do is I want to get rid of everybody in this image. So you are going to grab the lasso tool, the L key, and you need to select one of these guys. So I'm going to select the guy that's here on the right-hand side. What you need to know about Content Aware Fill is this. You cannot just select what you want to replace. You have got to include some of the material that you are actually going to replace it with. So for instance, I could come here. I'm going to start using just the quick selection tool. So everybody grab the quick selection tool. It's the fourth tool down. Come over here, make your tool really, really, really small so that it sits on the inside of the guy's head, and simply click once. And you'll see you get an outline that goes around this guy's head. However, I'm going to use Content Aware now. I'm going to come up to the Edit menu, down to Fill, and then in the drop-down menu here, I'm going to go up to Content Aware. You would leave Color Adaptation checked, a normal blending mode, 100% opacity, and do not check this Preserve Transparency, and say OK. And you can see what it does, that it actually replaces the center part that was selected, but I've still got the outline of this guy. That is because I did not go out of those lines. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that, Command D to deselect that. Then I'm going to hit the L key to get the lasso tool, and I'm going to do a selection around this guy manually. Make sure that you get all of the guy, including his reflection that's in the water. So this is what my little marching ants look like. And then again, up to the Edit menu, down to Fill, Content Aware Fill, and say OK. Command D to deselect. Come over to the next guy over here. Click and drag around this guy as well. Make sure that you get his reflection and the shadow as well. Up to the Edit menu, down to Fill, Content Aware Fill. Command D to deselect. Now, in this case, it does a very good job of this, but some people would argue, well, you know, Verser, yeah, but I can spot where these guys are. There's a patterning that's actually happening in here. Just because you've used Content Aware to do the heavy lifting doesn't mean you can't fix this a little bit better. To do that, hit the S key to get the Clone Stamp tool. The Clone Stamp tool excels at doing this. This is not healing. This is actually replacing. What we need to do is we need to have some of these ripple lines actually going through this area of of strong turquoise, whatever you want to call that right here. So to do that, I'm going to come out here to its side. I'm going to hold down the Option key, click once, that'll give me a sampling over here, and then I'm going to come over to this area that just looks kind of grainy, and I'm going to just kick it through and put some more texture back into it. And so that kills the pattern that was actually repeating in this guy, and I'm good to go. Hit the L key again to get the lasso tool. I just used the hand by holding down the space bar to move down, and I'm simply going to select around the buoy that's in the back, up to the edit menu, down to fill, content aware fill, Command D to deselect. The buoy is gone. I'm going to now select the people that are on the raft, up to edit menu, down to fill, content aware, Command D to deselect. I'm going to double click the hand to kick back out. So the people are now gone. The boat's gone, all that. Oh, I've got a boat on the horizon here, so I'm going to zoom into this. Again, I'm holding down the space bar and the command key. Hit the L key to get the lasso tool. When you do this, you need to make sure that you are getting part of the sky and part of the sea as well. Then again, up to the edit menu, down to fill, content aware fill. Command D to deselect. It does a shockingly good job of keeping the horizon line. But now let's get ambitious about this. Double click on the hand. Go back to your quick selection tool for me. And again, you don't want to use this tool outside the lines. You've got to keep it inside the island that's on the back. So don't cross over where the island meets the sky. Don't cross over where the island meets the sea. But simply stay inside that. And I need you to do a quick selection of the island. So does everybody have this going? So I need to remember, I said, if the same thing would happen now if we tried to use content aware fill that happened to the guy in the beginning. That's not going to work for me. However, if you go up to the select menu, everybody look up at my screen, select menu down to modify, down to expand. And we're going to put in a value of 10 pixels. That should work on this. I'm going to say OK to that. You will see that it expands my selection out, and this is now exactly the selection that I want. I've got part of the sky and part of the sea. Has everybody got this going? Up to the edit menu, down to fill, content aware fill. Now you'll see that there's an anomaly that happens right here in the corner. I'm OK with that. Command D to deselect. Hit the L key to get a lasso tool and select the sea that got moved up into the sky a second time. Up to the edit menu, down to fill, content aware fill, Command D to deselect. Are you fucking kidding me? Oh, wait, we're not done. Come down here. I want you to select both of the kids that are in the surf, but you'll notice that the little girl that's closest to us, she's got a reflection as well, so you need to make sure that you get that reflection as well. Up to the edit menu, down to fill, content aware fill, Command D to deselect. And finally, the two kids that are on this side over here, I'm going to go after them all in one fell swoop. Again, you need to make sure that you get the reflections of both of them as well as all of their shadows. Again, the lasso tool works just like it always does. If you miss a selection, like I missed part of the of her shadow right here, simply hold down the Shift key and you can add to that selection. So now I've included all of her up to the fill menu, down edit menu, down to fill, content aware fill. Command D to deselect. Again, you'll notice that there are a few problems that we've got going on in here that we actually need to clean up. So back to the S key to get the clone stamp tool. I'm missing this edge line in the sand right here. That's what I feel like I was missing right here. So I'm with this clone stamp tool, Option key to click and select this, and I'm going to paint that part back in. I feel like I've got an anomaly that's happening here in this water as well. So I'm going to start over here on the far left side. Option click to set that, and then come through to actually add some more. Again, I'm going to reset options, otherwise you'll start to pick up patterning in this. So I'm going to reset another option to get rid of some of this part right here, reset another option to get rid of some of that part right there, probably hit on this to bring down that little part right there. And you guys get how this whole thing is going. Double click on the hand. Are you fucking kidding me? That doesn't suck, does it? We have got 2 minutes to gild the lily here, so I'm going to go for the whole show here. I actually really want a square frame because I'm going to use this for my new Instagram background. So I need this to be a square image. Come up to the image menu, come down to canvas size. In my drop-down menu right here, I've got inches, so go ahead. All you need to do is make whatever the same number is. So I need to make the width exactly the same as my height. So I'm going to drag across this, and I'm going to put in 12.361. I'm going to leave the anchor point in the middle, which basically what it'll do, it'll put half of the extension on the right and half of the extension on the left. So I'm going to go ahead and say that's fine, and I'm going to click on that to do it. I'm going to double click on the hand again so I can see my entire screen. If you unclick the layer that's on the bottom, because the background it added white, that extended the canvas by adding white, but you'll notice that in the image that's in the top, the one I'm working on, this retouching right here, it actually adds transparent pixels right here. I'm going to hit the M key to get the marquee tool, or select the second one down. I'm going to, everybody look at my screen, because we went over this, I think, in our very first class, but I need to make sure that you guys know that this works this way. If you click and start to drag out, you will get part of the selection going. However, I need the selection to go all the way to the top of my screen. So if you hold down the space bar, you can move this guy around. So I'm now going to goose it all the way up so that it's actually covering up, so that it's all the way to the very top. That gives me my top left-hand corner. I'm going to click and drag all the way down and let go. So now I've actually got this image it's got part of my image in here. It's all the way at the top. It's all the way, all of my transparent pixels are selected up to the image menu, down to, the edit menu, down to fill, content aware fill. Command D to deselect, and then I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side. I'm going to click and start to drag down. I'm going to hold down my space bar, my space bar to goose the top left-hand corner up until it's all the way up in the corner. Let go of the space bar and continue to drag out and come all the way down and go up to edit and come down to fill and do content aware fill. Command D to deselect, and now I've got my square image for Instagram. And look where we started. If you come over to your history palette, click on the little camera that's down at the bottom. It'll create a history snapshot. If you don't get this dialog box, it's okay. It's actually made one. Go up to the very top of your screen. You should have two icons up here now. If you click on the first one, that's what your image looked like to begin with. That's what we did in 15 minutes. Yeah. And I'll see you guys next week. Are there questions about this? Are we good?